Hey there.
Hi.
Thinking I need to find my earbuds. What time is it? 12, it's 1:30. I don't think the girls will be home yet. Huh, I wonder where I put them. I'll be back. I plugged them in where they should be. That's where they are.
Oh, that's always when I lose my headphones is when they're charging. Yeah.
Huh? Yeah. When I found that I could charge them where my charger is right here instead of in the kitchen, it's like, oh wow, that's easy.
Good. So
Issues. Huh?
I'm just now reading Buffy's email because I was in my car.
Yeah, I just skimmed it. I'm trying to.
If I can be totally frank.
Stop recording.
Oh.
You want me to stop recording?
Are you the host?
I came in, yeah.
Oh yeah, you did. Okay.
Hold on.
I mean, it's.
Okay. I'm horrible at following.
I'm gonna say you want anything.
What's that?
I was just gonna say water also. Thanks for including us.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm horrible at following chat, especially when I have to facilitate. Anyways, public comment. Do we have any public comment? Anybody who would like to provide public comment? Going once, going twice. No.
I think Teresa's talking.
I am,
she's
but I was
on
muted.
mute.
I was muted.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks,
So I discovered an art gallery downtown, in downtown Bend yesterday called Scale House, which sells portraits, not portraits, prints off of paintings, not sure what, of people, Native Americans. And whatever they sell, a lot of the proceeds go to the Crow Shadow Institute of Arts in Warm Springs to help artists continue to produce. And if it's in Timpan Alley, if any of you want to stop in there or have really rich friends that like art, take them there. Anyway, FYI.
Thank you, Teresa. Anybody else? Okay. Let's move on to approving our meeting minutes. Everybody get a chance to read through those, and if so, any comments before we vote? Any discussion at all? Okay, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes from our May meeting?
Move adoption of the minutes.
Thank you, Linda. Second? Anybody? Teresa, you're on mic. Would you like to second?
Sure. I'll
All right.
second that motion.
I guess I'm muted is what I meant to say. Unmuted. Thank you. All right, and please say yay, or please say yay if you approve of the minutes.
Yay.
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 Yay. It's always weird voting by Zoom. Anybody opposed? Any nays? All right, thank you. I think that was enough to pass. Would everybody agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we're good. Thanks, everybody. All right, I just want to highlight that for us to be successful today, we will succeed in completely achieving our second agenda item. I guess let's say our first and second agenda items. We cannot leave today without completing our discussion on community health projects, process and development. We just really need to nail that stuff down so that we can move forward and get our requests for proposals out and so forth. Ideally, of course, we'll finish the entire agenda, but I just want to make that clear. So let's go ahead and move on to the share spending plan with Kristen and Colleen.
Sure. Hey, Michaela, can I just check with you real quick? Do you have Colleen's set of slides for the next portion of this? Oh, Michaela.
I don't.
Okay, I'm going to send them right now.
Okay.
And then we will start. I'm sorry about that.
Do you want hers first?
Nope, mine are first is perfect, but I'll send these up real quick. Sorry. All right. Okay, sorry about that. All right. Okay, here we go. So we're back this month to talk a little bit more about the SHARE funding, and we're gonna just sort of go over how the SHARE initiative funding is different from the community health projects that you guys are gonna be talking about next. Next slide, please. So this again sort of defines what each of the projects are. These are community investment projects handed down from the Oregon Health Authority, really. So SHARE is supporting health for all through reinvestment, and it requires specific source to spend a portion of their profits at the end of the year. So 2020 profits is what we're spending this year. To address health inequities and social determinants of health and equity. And then community health projects, which is what you guys are also working on, is Pacific Source provides funding for community level projects that focus on improving population health and healthcare quality. Both the SHARE funding and the community health projects also have to align with our regional health improvement plan, the RIP. And SHARE also has one other unique feature, which is that it also has to align with the state's health improvement plan, also called the SHIP. And thankfully, that includes a lot of things around housing. So one of those sort of improvements that they would like to see is requiring housing first principles be adopted in all housing programs. So another reason that we're working with Fuse. Next slide, please. So here's some more sort of differences between the two funding streams. The SHARE initiative projects do not have to include OHP members. They can be a little bit broader and community focused. Community health projects must include, but are not limited to OHP members. So the idea is that we're supporting organizations that are working with our members, but they can't pay for individual member needs like a flexible service request would like pay for a gym membership. Community health projects are more community based and broad and not for individual members. So health related service rules do not apply to the SHARE funding projects. And they do apply to the community health projects. Some of the health related service rules include you're not allowed to build housing or any kind of brick and mortar building or build supportive housing developments. And this is due to federal guidelines sent by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which states room and board is not a permissible Medicaid or OHP expense. So that is why with these funds, with the community health project funds, we're not able to build or pay for housing directly because of the federal guidelines around how that money can be spent. The community health project money also cannot pay for ongoing rental assistance or any service covered by OHP, which would include durable medical equipment, medical screenings, and prescriptions. Funds for individual members or single households would also be excluded from community health projects, which would also again include like a gym membership or perhaps like a weighted blanket purchased for an individual household versus perhaps like Alice Hatch said, we'd like to have 50 blankets that we could just give to families in need, that would be permissible. But if it was just an individual family requesting that, that would fall under our flexible services. It's confusing. We're sorry. Next slide, please. So here again is just kind of a comparison. The dollars to invest for share this year, just shy of $58,000, where Community Health Projects has 431 and a little bit more to spend. And then you'll see too that our time to complete this work, and by completing the work, I mean submitting everything to the Oregon Health Authority, not the actual projects. We have about 4 months turnaround on the Share Initiative projects. And with the Community Health Projects, you guys have closer to a year. I actually don't have to report that. I don't have to submit the report to the Oregon Health Authority until March of next year, but we do have to cut those checks to the CBOs by December 31st of this year. Next slide, please. Okay, so then another one. So the administrative responsibility, and by that, I mean, who has to demonstrate compliance with the rules that the Oregon Health Authority has in place? And the compliance happens through either a narrative report. So perhaps we submit a report that tells a story about how the funds have been used, or perhaps some kind of a financial document where it's just purely numbers and this is how much money has been spent down in this pool of money and this is how we spent it. And then sometimes those reporting might also include a memorandum of understanding, which is part of the Share Initiative. So that's a legal document created between Pacific Source and the Community Benefit Organization that lines out who is doing what. And let's see, I guess that's kind of what the administrative responsibility is. So for the share funding, that falls to Pacific Source. And for the community health projects, that falls to the CAC and the Central Oregon Health Council, those requirements or those reporting obligations. So then down below, it talks a little bit more about the CAC's role in each of these projects. And part of the reason why the CAC's role this year is somewhat limited with the share funding is because we only learned how much money we were going to have to spend in May. And the turnaround is just really quick. And you guys are also really busy with the community health projects. And I'm hoping that today, by looking at the side-by-side slides, it makes it a little bit more clear why we couldn't just sort of like roll that $58,000 in with the community health projects. They just have different requirements around them from the Oregon Health Authority. There's different reporting mechanisms in place. And really the Share Initiative funds requires that memorandum of understanding be put in place. And that would be a really difficult process to do in a 4-month time span if we were giving this money to multiple organizations. With that, I would love to hear any comments or questions that you have for me, and then we'll move on to Colleen, and she's going to share a little bit more about this project.
Thanks, Kristen. Before we do that, I just want to bring in the people who have joined by phone, and if anybody joined by video a little bit late. So I think Elizabeth is with us, maybe.
That was me, yes. Yes.
Elizabeth. And
Hi, I'm on computer also. It's just, I can't communicate unless I'm on the phone. So,
okay.
thank you.
And who else joined us?
This is
Hi, it's
Tanya
Leslie
Creel with
Nuggebauer from
OHA.
Pacific Source. Sorry.
You say that one more time. I'm sorry. I couldn't understand. Who was that who introduced yourself on the phone?
This is Leslie Nuggebauer from Pacific Source.
Okay. Hi, Leslie. Elizabeth and Leslie, when we started the meeting, we all shared our favorite beverage. Would you like to share your favorite beverage? Just what's your favorite thing to drink?
Water.
Water. All right.
That's
Elizabeth?
so boring.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Chai tea.
Chai tea. All right.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And this
Okay.
is Tanya Curiel. I think I
Oh.
spoke over someone earlier, and apologies for being late. And I'll be boring too. I like water.
Thanks, Tanya. All right. So back to follow up to Kristen, what she just presented to us on the share initiative. Does anybody have questions, comments? No? Great. So the follow-up to that is the Fuse project, which is what's being proposed to be funded with that 50-something thousand dollars. And we heard from Colleen last month. So this is kind of a follow-up for those of you who were with us last month. But it was very fast and furious. So she's back with us again. So this is the project that is being proposed to be funded, and the CAC needs to vote as soon as we finish with Colleen. So take it away, Colleen.
Yeah, thank you, Brad, and thank you so much, everybody, for having me. Wave your hand if you can't hear me. I'm not used to presenting outside of my house, so thanks for bearing with me on this. But I am Colleen Sinsky. I use she, her pronouns with Central Oregon Fuse, and I'm happy to be here today to propose to you a project that we're hoping to do with Fuse that would benefit the whole continuum. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. And I know last month was fast and furious, but this time I'm also going to be kind of fast and furious because I want to allow time for some questions and dialogue. So in short, Fuse is working on developing permanent supportive housing, which allows folks with barriers or marginalized identities to access housing using the Housing First model. So we're offering access to subsidized affordable housing and the support services that ensure someone's going to be successful there. Supporting folks getting into apartments in the community. And we're doing that. I shared this last time that it's kind of like building the bridge and walking alongside someone, helping mitigate those individual barriers to housing. As you are probably familiar, Central Oregon has a housing crisis. And while I wish I could just create units for folks, the project that we're proposing is about as close as we can come to leveraging existing resources and existing units so that our folks who, not just Fuse participants, but people from the spectrum receiving housing are able to access those resources. So this is what Fuse does currently. We're hoping to add to it with this project. You can go to the next slide. We can go to the next slide. Oh, that was the next slide, is this project. Thanks. Oh no, I'm sorry if I'm frozen. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but your camera's frozen. Maybe turn off your camera.
Okay. Okay, let's see if that's any better. I apologize. I think we missed a slide there. If you don't mind going back one really quick. Sorry about that. So in short, the benefits that this program offers is that we're hoping to allow Central Oregon as a continuum to accept and actually make use of 96 brand new housing vouchers that Housing and Urban Development just very recently released to our continuum. This is a lot more than Central Oregon is used to having, and a lot more than service providers or Housing Works are really used to working with at one time, which is fantastic, but still doesn't create new units. So basically, if these vouchers aren't used, then that money goes back to HUD and doesn't stay in Central Oregon. So we want to build the program that'll incentivize landlords to rent to people with marginalized identities and mitigate some of their risks. So we want to do that by coming up with like a landlord package to kind of communicate the benefits and make the business case for renting to someone with a subsidy. Offer things like tenant pre-screening and tenant pre-screening, renter's insurance, access to a mitigation fund, which is like an enhanced security deposit access for participants of FUSE or other agencies who are going to be able to offer at least a year of ongoing wraparound support. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so the program component would have both the outreach package available to all 96 emergency housing voucher holders and to FUSE participants. The landlord mitigation fund is something that we would set aside. Hopefully it would never be touched. We would have to fundraise more funding to kind of enhance that amount available here. But this is something that the entire continuum of homeless services has talked about having and wanted to have for years. So this is something that we're kind of finally enacting for the community, and folks are really excited about it. Everybody who I've talked to, it's just something needed in Central Oregon. And then hiring a part-time person who could do that outreach and like let mom and pop landlords and bigger property management companies know what they would have access to. So in addition to this grant, we would be bringing in other resources like match funding for that mitigation fund, would be partnering with agencies to provide ongoing housing retention, some of the federal LIHEAP utility assistance and eviction prevention, both by FUSE and other agencies, that the vouchers are a federal resource, and the continuum of care is going to hire housing coordinated system. And then what fuses to it is board member time, connections, staff time, and infrastructure. So we'd be following an example that exists from Join in Portland, but also other programs that have been successful in this way. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, but that's kind of oh, I'm sorry, the budget, the important part. So this is a budget I put together for what this could look like. I do want to warn you that there's a lot of moving parts with HUD releasing the vouchers so recently. It's kind of a scramble to figure out what the partnerships are going to look like and who's going to be doing what to get these out the door. The Homeless Leadership Coalition is working with Housing Works and Thrive, and we're part of the conversation to just see like what's most efficient. So this is kind of what I'm proposing in terms of having what makes most sense for consultants to do, what can we do in-house, what will we have to match in order to like build that resource. And yeah, just like I gave a range because some of this will require another few weeks of figuring out exactly what that looks like. So I'm gonna pause there, and I think you can go to the next slide, which is just a couple of logos, but we can maybe end screen share and just have a conversation with the remainder of the time.
What is the landlord mitigation fund? What is that specifically?
Sure, I'm sorry for not explaining that better. So the landlord mitigation fund is, it's a concept that, so say if I'm a mom and pop landlord and I have an apartment, that this is like where I expect, like I've poured a lot of money into it. I expect that this is gonna fund my retirement. I would prefer to rent that out to someone who's like safe, someone who's like a professional who just moved up from the Bay Area, who has a huge income. So what can we as an organization do to tell that landlord, like make it safer for them to rent to someone, to a working family or a single mom who has a housing choice voucher? So we want to let them know that their investment is safe. And we do that by saying, like, if you sign on to our program and agree to be a good landlord and like not take advantage of folks, abide by fair housing, we'll support our tenants. And if things go terribly wrong and your unit gets trashed or the person gets evicted for cause, that you as a landlord have access to this enhanced security deposit. So say you could make a claim through our process to get up, we would have to set the parameters, but to get, say, $4,000 to repair the unit, which is a lot more than someone's security deposit, but could help make it feel safer for the landlord to lease to someone with barriers. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's kind of like an insurance policy a little bit. But does
Yes,
that include
exactly.
rent? If rent rent will be paid through the vouchers, correct? Just like HUD?
Largely, yeah. So somebody would pay a third of their income, whether their income is Social Security or through a job. They'd pay a third of their income, and then the voucher would pay the rest.
Okay.
Mhm.
And how do you qualify for this program? I mean, given the reality of rent today, even in Central Oregon, people with good jobs still can't afford to live anywhere. So do they qualify, or is this just basically people that are on the streets? Literally the homeless, or who qualifies for Fuse?
That's a really good question. So there's both Fuse, and then there's these 96 vouchers that are actually not Fuse clients. We want to support the whole continuum. So Fuse clients in particular have to be chronically homeless. And that definition means that they've been homeless for over a year and have a disability. For those 96 emergency housing vouchers, I think that Housing Works is still setting some of those requirements, but I think it would have to be an individual or household who's either homeless, at risk of homeless, fleeing domestic violence, or a trafficking victim, survivor. So.
Hi, Colleen, it's Larry. What is the size of the voucher?
The size, I think the amount of the voucher would depend on someone's income and on the rent amount of the unit. It would have to fall under HUD's fair market cap, which is.
You want to turn off your video again, Colleen?
Oh no, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. Larry, to answer your question, the size of the voucher would depend on the unit rent and someone's income. The unit would have to fall under HUD's fair market cap. So again, I don't want to overpromise. This program can't create units, and that's the biggest challenge in Central Oregon right now. But the size of the voucher would depend on those parameters. Does that answer your question?
And how much below what real market value is for, or real market rental rates are in Bend right now, which is skyrocketing? What's the gap between that and the HUD approved level?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, it changes every year, and I don't think they've put it out yet. I think they just released it for 2021, but it's around 1,200 for a 1-bedroom. It might be a 2-bedroom. It's really easy to find online, and I just don't have the most updated numbers off the top of my head. I know that Housing Works would like to get that increased, and they're working on talking to HUD, but it's a really long process that requires some consultant work, and yeah, it's a much bigger process to get that to reflect reality.
Thank you.
Good questions. Are there any other questions before we consider a vote on this?
What are we voting on? I missed last week, sorry. But
So the request from Pacific Source is to vote to approve the proposed budget.
oh, okay.
And we were going to try to use our 5-finger voting, but I'm not convinced we can do that with people on the phone because they would have to actually speak it. I don't know. What does the staff think? Should we just do yay, nay, or should we try 5-finger voting?
Kristen, this is Buffy. Can you put the budget back up so that they can look at it and reflect?
Sure, Michaela, do you still have that handy? Thank you.
Yeah, one sec.
Good idea, Buffy. Thank you.
Okay. So if there's any specific questions about the budget, now's the time.
And this is for basically putting this program together and selling it to the landlords? Correct?
That's correct.
They're not buying it, but they're participating. That's how they're a client, so to speak.
Yeah, that's correct. They'd be a participant. I think there'd still have to be some additional match brought in from other sources to support this, but yeah, what you said is right, Teresa.
But this is a start. And ideally, this is an ongoing program. It just keeps going. Finding the funding to keep it going. Is this brand new or has it existed for a while?
Yeah, that's a good question. It has not existed in Central Oregon. It's something that, well, when I worked for the Homeless Leadership Coalition, there were so many conversations about it. People have wanted it for a long time, and I'm freezing again, so I'm going to answer this
in the chat. Oh, okay.
So I can give some background, Colleen, if you want to. So this is Elaine. I'm a Fuse board member, and just to give context, I'm sure Colleen talked about this last month also that I missed last month, but this Fuse was started by just various collaborative conversations in the community about the fact that we didn't have permanent supportive housing, especially on the Housing First model at all in Central Oregon. And it was just like a hot potato, like everyone wanted to talk about it, but no one was owning it. And so the police, the city, medical, housing, like all over. And so actually, eventually after a year of conversation, Fuse was born. And is now up and going, but it's really, we're all so excited to have like an entity that is focused on this huge gap in Central Oregon. So it is new, and we're behind in this in terms of the rest of the state and the nation.
Okay, so is this Central Oregon program modeled after another one, Fuse program that already exists? Did I read something about PDX has one? Portland?
There are programs in Portland and Salem and other places that do the Housing First model. There's a few throughout the state. And there's a national model and a national entity that really advocates for this, that it's actually really interesting. They get federal support to advocate for this model, and then you have to go figure out your own model, and then you can access the HUD funding to, for the housing support of this, but not the services and like this landlord mitigation. So it's communities funding it in their own ways.
Okay, so but the reason I asked that is to see if there's other people we're modeling after, other cities, towns, whatever, or are we not reinventing the wheel, so to speak? So we've kind of learned from people and we know where to go with this. Yay? Yeah?
Yes, and actually, I have to say, we snagged Colleen a little bit from the Homeless Leadership Coalition work, and we were so lucky because she worked for a similar program in Portland called Join, and probably has more knowledge of this model than anyone else in Central Oregon. And one of our other board members ran a similar model, the Bud Clark Commons in Portland, but he wasn't one on the ground. So having him and other board members, but having Colleen, who actually worked in this before, has been a huge asset. Okay. And she's brilliant, so.
Yay.
Great questions, Teresa. Thanks. Do you have more?
Not, I'm just assuming this is, my last question is it doesn't seem like a whole lot of money, but it's a start, I'm assuming, correct?
That's correct, Teresa. Especially for the mitigation fund itself. I mean, 2 claims could eliminate that.
Right.
So we'd really have to be fundraising for additional funds. Yeah, good questions.
And on the third, the fuse staff time, it says additional match from Central Oregon Health Council and Community Development Block Grants. Does that mean you're going to be plan to apply in the fall to our community health projects? Or do you already have?
We have an application in progress.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So actually to the RIP group. So that should say COHC RIP funding,
There you go. Okay.
stable housing and supports.
Thanks, Elaine.
Okay, well, we need to, anybody want to make a motion to approve their spending plan?
I would move that we approve as presented.
Second.
Okay, Ken and Linda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yay or yes.
Okay.
Yay.
Yay.
Missing anybody? Anybody opposed? Say opposed. It would appear that we have approved the share spending plan. All right,
Thank
thanks,
you,
Chris.
guys. We
Yeah.
look forward to bringing it back too and sharing what has been created. So thank you all.
It's good work. Thanks. All right, well, that put us a little over on our next agenda item, but we will very likely we'll need to take up all the time we need. Hopefully we can be efficient, but take the time we need to come to agreements on our community health projects process. So Michaela, please take it away.
Thanks, Brad. So today we have some decisions to make. I want to finalize the letter of interest as well as the scorecard. I'm going to pull up the letter of interest right now. That one. Okay. And so just a reminder, community health projects are to fund, community level interventions projects that really address social determinants of health and health equity. And the CAC decided to do a letter of interest, send out requests for letters of interest into the community, and then invite those projects that they are interested in funding to fill out the full application. So this is just the first step in the process, and this is meant to ask folks that are interested, organizations, entities in the community, to apply to this, to submit a letter of interest, so a high-level overview of their project. And then you as CAC members will review that LOI, score it, and then invite those entities to fill out the full application if you're serious about funding them. So this is the information that we'll send out to request those letters of interest. It's supposed to kind of give an overview of what the CAC is looking for. So I sent this out last month, asked for folks to give feedback. We also had some discussion around the award amount, and I sent out a Survey Monkey with that for y'all to complete. And so I want to go over different pieces of this. Let me turn off my email so it doesn't keep dinging. But the first piece that I want to go over is the award range. So we spent a couple of months talking about this, and the doodle poll results showed $5,000 to $80,000 as the award range. So majority said have the floor be at 5,000, and then the average for the ceiling was like 77,900 and something. So I rounded it to 80,000. So any discussion around the award range? And I'm hoping that we can improve this.
Michaela, are you wanting to improve this kind of piece by piece?
Yeah,
or-
you.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and vote. If you approve of this award range, please say yay.
Yay.
Yes.
Yay.
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 All right, thumbs up and yays. Anybody not approve, say nay or no. All right, I think we're good. Thanks, everybody who participated in that survey.
Yay. First position down. Awesome. Okay, so then moving on to the feedback around the request for letters of interest itself. So I received 2 pieces of feedback. One was to include diversity, equity, inclusion, call that out in its own separate bullet. So you'll see that right here. So for those on the phone, this bullet says projects must apply diversity, equity, and inclusion principles and practices. So thoughts, conversations around including this as its own separate bullet.
What does that mean specifically? Applies to that nobody's excluded regardless, or what does that mean?
Yeah, different like best practices or ways to go about their project.
To sort of
Is that-
develop
For
diversity.
example, if a project wanted to inform people, potential users of the project they're proposing, or enroll people in getting the word out, they would need to say how they got it out to non-traditional groups, people of color, people, LGBTQ communities. That would be one example of a project request that said, you know, because we want to be broad in our acceptance, we're going to go and make a specific advertisement or notice to this community group that they can participate. Doesn't mean that everybody gets in, but they would make an effort for inclusion on that.
Okay. So it really is about dissemination.
It depends on the project, I think. It could be that they choose to, if a part of the project that's being proposed contracts with local people, that they might, one way to meet this requirement would mean that they contract with a minority business, would be another example.
Okay.
And I would say this is, I think it's great to include this, but we do need to add it to we need to add, to Teresa's point, and definition explanation, some parameters in the document that you put together with the project requirements and restrictions, key definitions.
Okay.
We definitely need to include it in that so that this question is answered for the grantees, because that'll definitely come up for anybody who's not like immersed in the work of diversity, equity, inclusion.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think it can get too general, and then I think you set yourself up, or you get too specific, like we're only going to work with people of color. Well, then you're setting yourself up to be sued, or, you know, it's like, it's such a hard thing, especially because Central Oregon is so white, says this white woman. And I want to see everything really diverse, but I also wish it didn't matter, that we were just naturally diverse, but I know we're not. I think it's just it's a fine line not to set yourself up, because we want to be all inclusive, but we don't, you know, there's hateful people out there. So I don't know, but I don't have an answer. So,
Yeah, we definitely need to be inclusive. Andy, you have your hand up.
I'm wondering if we're making this that they must have DEI principles and practices. Does this mean that the organ will have to have a DEI policy just going to practice? Because I feel like if they're going to practice these principles, then they should at least have a policy stating that they're going to do that within their organization as well. Otherwise, they can say it, but not necessarily have the back it up. Does that make sense?
good point.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of foundations now that ask you to supply a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement that your organization has developed.
So could we edit it like that and just projects must apply diversity, equity, inclusion principles and practice, please include your policy of how you meet those things.
Yeah, that could be a question in the application.
Okay,
Just kind of
not the letter. Okay,
then get real specific in the application.
Okay.
I have one other comment on this. So so we have the both of those bullet points. Project must address social determinants of health and equity. It's the first bullet point. The second is projects must apply diversity, equity, inclusion principles and practices. And the scoring form specifically mentions, has a section, part 2, with project addresses social determinants of health. And yet it doesn't have a specific question or section on diversity, equity, inclusion. So I think we either need to add a question to the scoring form on that, or talk about whether or not bullet point number 1 also incorporates bullet point number 2, or could incorporate bullet point number 2. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense, Brad. And I could support either making an additional bullet with some points allocated to that bullet, or if it's going to be included in social determinants of health, make sure that it's spelled out that both are included in the same section and what the total point value is.
Also, details of how, like the exact principles and practices that they use could be in the full application, where this just calls out that needs to be important.
And I don't want to take us off track, but this is a perfect opportunity to point out that this is where I really believe the role of the CODI, the Central Oregon Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Work Group. Did I get that right? It should really be providing us guidance on this. I mean, that's what I see their role being. If I'm mistaken, please say so, but it'd be great for us to get, some kind of input or guidance. I don't know if we have time at this particular moment. I don't think we do, but just want to put that out there.
I agree.
Mandy, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Sorry, I forgot to take it down.
Okay.
So how are we feeling on adding it to the first bullet, keeping it as it's separate with the definition?
Do we want to vote? I think we should keep it separate with a definition. Because it says to us that it's super, super important, which it is, but I think it's helpful not to be vague.
Other thoughts?
Anybody opposed to that? Teresa's proposal that we, and whoever else had input on this, adding that second bullet point to really specify. Is anybody opposed to that? Okay, so, and then we would include a definition guidance on this key definitions and project requirements document. We need to add that.
Yeah.
And then we would also add I believe we need to, if we're gonna have that as a specific bullet point, we need to add maybe just another row to that application part 2 on the scoring form.
So would you want them to describe their DEI practices, principles and practices when they fill out their letter of interest, or would you want those details in the application?
Are you asking me or Brad or everyone?
The CAC.
Everyone.
Okay.
I just suggest one approach could be, along with your LOI, please provide your organization's statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That would actually, for those who don't have one, they would need to get on the ball and develop one.
Right.
Isn't a bad thing. As long as we give them time.
Yeah, that is a good thing. That's a good idea.
And then in the application itself, they need to share how in this particular project they plan to integrate those principles.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Got an agreed from Andy in the chat. How's everybody feel about that?
Good.
Including the bullet point for diversity, equity, inclusion principles and practices, including guidance, definition, whatever that looks like on the community health projects letter of interest. What are we calling this? Grant information, project requirements, key definitions. And then also adding a line and some scoring points to the community health project scoring form for that bullet point.
Good.
Sound good?
Good.
Any further discussion on that? Yeah, I think. Awesome. Good work.
All
Does
right.
that help you, Michaela? Does that solve that for you?
Yeah, that does. And then we can look at the scoring application right after this. One other piece of feedback was to add in that sustainability is important. And that's kind of a question to the group. Is sustainability prioritized in projects? You know, and it may or may not be. I mean, on one hand, it's great to fund projects that are sustainable and programs are sustainable. That way, you know, it's not a one-off, or, you know, that project, those resources are taken away from the community. On the other hand, it may not be feasible for that specific project. And I know some nonprofits, their sustainability plan is to keep getting grants. So maybe some discussion, some consideration around sustainability.
So this is Larry. I'm on the substance use disorder work group, and we're taking our particular subgroup of that work group is taking the approach of doing both. And what we describe for part of it is that it's to stop the bleeding, because some of the organizations are in dire need of money right now because the need is so immense. And so we call that stop the bleeding. And then the second prong of our approach is then to try and develop some means of sustainability, and that's in reference to peer support. But so we definitely try to address both. And if we, I think if we determine that we literally describe it as bleeding, that and the organizations need the money that badly, that we will consider those as well.
Thanks, Larry. Maybe some thoughts on wanting to prioritize sustainable projects or projects that have a sustainability plan.
Yeah, this is Brad. I have strong feelings about this as a nonprofit director, and I've already shared them with the subcommittee, or the group that kind of worked on this offline. And it's just a loaded term. It often doesn't mean much of anything other than, and that's where, I mean, essentially for a nonprofit, you're always raising money. You don't, I mean, money doesn't just flow into your organization effortlessly. So you're either writing grants or you're asking for donations, and that's an ongoing process. You're always doing it. You're always going to do it. The sustainable is, I mean, does that really mean ongoing? Does that mean forever funded, which is not realistic for most projects? Anyways, that's my input. So do we mean ongoing projects? Do we mean impactful projects? I would say
Yeah,
impactful.
Brad, myself also running a nonprofit, I agree with you 100%, that's for sure. It's always that's most of the time you spend is trying to raise money.
And this is Linda. Sustainable to me doesn't mean just money. It could mean in the way that you carry out your project, you leave people with the knowledge who are already paid to do a specific job, and they can continue to carry the new knowledge forward with them and disperse that to new groups without additional funding. So I think it's partly how the project is designed. Even so, if you know that the funding is only going to be there for a year, in your planning of the project, how can you make sure when the funding ends that the program doesn't end as well? And it could mean that you do need to raise more money. It could mean that it's handed off to another partner. It could mean that the program design is integrated and planned in such a way that the usefulness of the program continues even when there's no specific funding for it. So it's pretty wide open from my perspective.
Buffy here. I think the only thing that I would interject for you guys to think about is when you talk about saying special consideration will be given to sustainable projects. If you don't have a system in place to score that special consideration and then be able to defend it or back it up, I would highly advise that you maybe use those more descriptive words like Brad was saying about what your true intention is, so that you guys aren't painting this all into a corner potentially. Because I would be, if I read this, I would be saying, oh, well, if my project has existed for 5 years and it's pretty sustainable, what special considerations are you going to give me? Do I get more points because I've existed for 5 years? See, does that help?
Yes, that's a really good point, I think, because I think that if we talk about sustainability in those terms, then we might be discouraging innovation and discouraging new ideas that might prove useful, and in the execution of a new idea, you might prove your sustainability at some point, attract support for it.
I think those are both really good points. So, but Buffy also, I think what Buffy shared makes me wonder actually about the word special consideration more than the word sustainable. Yeah, so if we're saying special consideration will be given, what does that really mean? Applications will be receive higher scores. Is that what that means?
I think to me, it means I go to the top of the pile if I was applying. If I can prove I'm sustainable, although I feel like sustainable is a big new buzzword that's very vague.
So
In my
Mandy-
opinion. Was
Mandy,
that-
you want to share your comment?
Yeah, sorry, my internet's going in and out, so if you guys can't hear me, I apologize. I just suggested, what about replacing special consideration with priority and removing the word sustainable?
So that would read.
I guess I'm the one who threw this whole thing into the mix. The special consideration doesn't work for me. Even saying priority, I'm struggling with. I would be more comfortable, I think, if we said something like projects are encouraged to be sustainable to the greatest extent, period. It's a statement of priority as we evaluate it, but we're not saying if you throw that in, we're going to give you special consideration or you get more points, or it's the value that I think is important. And maybe the wording of that sentence I just said is, since off the top of my head, it's not quite right, but it takes it away from this expectation now that I'm going to get special treatment if I do include it. We want all projects to be including it, if possible.
So with that, with a separate sentence that says projects are encouraged to be sustainable, we definitely need a definition of sustainable. But then for the previous sentence, we just need to leave it, I think, less value, less.
How about this,
Projects-
Brad? Projects are encouraged to explain how the program will continue when the funding ends.
I like that better than sustainable, personally. What do other people think?
Yeah, what I've experienced is that almost the word sustainable has meant organizations that in some sense don't need the money as much. It's the organizations that have been around for a long time that have raised a lot of money already. And so again, I get back to that idea of innovation. So yeah, I guess I need to better understand what that means to describe how it's going to continue after the grant runs out.
And what if it's a short-lived program? You know, it's like somebody's applying because there's such a high need, you know, the economics and the housing and all this stuff is just, and so there's a huge population that needs help and support for whatever, just but in 5 years, you know, that won't exist, or in 2 years it won't exist, or the numbers will drop or whatever, just because of the way economies ebb and flow. It's still sustainable if you're expecting to do it for a year or two, then there's not a need. It's still a, you know, sustainable project if you're thinking you'll meet your goal in a year.
What I want to be careful of is, having reviewed in another work group that I'm on applications, I want to make sure that we haven't just opened the door for an organization that's been in existence for 10 years applies for funding that they'll use to operate one more year. But they have, and then at the end of the year, they're doing the same thing. They're coming back for more money. But they haven't done anything over and above what they're already doing.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to push back a little on that, Linda. I think what really matters is impact.
Right.
And if we can support an impact, making an impact in our community, we've done what we're supposed to do with these funds. Yeah, I don't know.
So could I get a pulse on who wants to leave a sustainability piece to the LOI and who doesn't, just to kind of get a gauge from CAC members? So yes, for having a component about sustainability in the LOI, no for not having a component around sustainability.
Are we doing this in the chat or out loud?
Let's do, if you can, do it in the chat, and then if you're on the phone, say it out loud.
Will you repeat that, Michaela? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if you want kind of sustainability mentioned somehow in this LOI, say yes to sustainability. If not, say no in the chat.
And then with the idea that if we vote yes, we'll just wordsmith it later.
Yeah,
Somebody
then
will.
conversation around it.
Okay.
Okay, anyone we're missing on the phone?
Shoot, we lost Ken and Jolene on the vote.
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 no's, 2 yeses.
And I want to thank everybody for a really thoughtful conversation. I've learned a great deal through this. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, thanks. Okay.
Are we okay with going with the majority there?
Yep.
Yeah. And having priority instead of special considerations. Okay. One other quick little edit that we made here, we just separated tribal nations from the geographic question of where or who the project will serve.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so nice job, everyone. Let's move on to the scorecard.
Michaela, I'm sorry. I didn't quite understand how we understood the outcome of that vote. What are you saying?
So we're going to leave out the sustainability piece on the letter of interest request, just because it's a little bit difficult to define that and some of the other reasons that were brought up in the conversation.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right, let me share the scorecard.
And I just want to bring up, is everybody okay with us essentially using the rest of the meeting to make these decisions about our community health projects? We're going to run out of time. We'll need to address the emerging issues process update and flexible services in August or offline in some other way. Anybody opposed to that? Okay, thanks.
All right. So this is the draft scorecard. Each of the components on here tie directly with a question for the letter of interest application. So not the full application, just the letter of interest. So that short kind of overview of the project. One thing that I do want to call out that we added here in the scorecard is the piece around Project Serves Tribal Nations. So including the tribes. So in our area, it's Klamath Tribes, Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribes of Indians, and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. Including them in the community health projects is a new requirement of CCO 2.0. So this really reflects the legislative desire, but more importantly, it reflects our region's desire to be better partners with our Indigenous neighbors. We've met with the CCO tribal liaison, Bethy, who's on the call today, CCO staff to kind of get a better understanding of what this means. And so we made these changes to the scorecard. It's our first attempt of including, being more inclusive, but we also understand that kind of next time around, we need to work with them more closely at the beginning of the process for the community health projects. So just want to throw that out there. So let me make sure everything's all right. So this is the scorecard. As I mentioned, these are the components and they correlate with the questions in the application for the LOI specifically, and then scoring, giving points across the top, and then tallying the score at the bottom. Any, I guess, first reactions to this?
Michaela, can you make it bigger?
Yes, we'll probably have to go section by section, but I can do that for sure. So first piece is the budget. Is it realistic? Is it unrealistic? Part 2 is about the project addressing social determinants of health.
That's the section, Michaela, that needs, we need to add the DEI.
Right.
Is this like the scorecard we had last year, Michaela? Or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that worked really well.
I think a couple questions may have been taken out just because this is a more abbreviated application since it's the first like letter of interest.
Is everybody okay having those two combined? Because we sort of, I thought we kind of decided we, at least in the bullet points, we weren't going to combine them. So I guess I wonder if everybody's okay combining them on the scoring form. Combining social determinants of health and diversity, equity, and inclusion.
As I'm thinking through this, if we combine them, it makes it easier to answer in one sense, but on the other hand, if they do a stellar job on social determinants of health, but they sort of forget, or they do their DEI efforts are insufficient from the viewer's perspective, if they're together, it's difficult to know how to score it.
I agree. I think they should be separate.
So for the LOI, that LOI application piece, when we were talking about the document before, we said in this round, let's just ask if they have a DEI statement. And then in the full application, which will have its own scorecard, have them explain their practices and principles of how they're going to do the project.
So right. That won't fit into your 5-point score. Maybe you could put just on a separate line DEI practices and then add 1 point if their policy is present or if they have a policy.
Okay.
That would be exceptional, wouldn't it? If they actually have an outline policy, they know what it is and it's implemented already. That would be exceptional in my opinion. But
Would you add 5 points for that, Teresa?
Yeah, if you had a DEI policy in place that you already implemented and it was written up as a mission statement or whatever, I think it would be exceptional because you've addressed it, you've dealt with it, you've created,
Correct.
you're implementing. Yeah, that's exceptional. Because I think it's easy to say we are all inclusive, but what does that mean? How do you do that?
Right.
Day to day. So, I mean, that's my personal opinion. That would be exceptional or at least satisfactory. But if they gave you a policy in the letter of interest, that would be exceptional, in my opinion. Because we're not asking for that. We're just saying, do you?
So if they don't mention it at all, it's a 0. And if they include a copy of it with their letter of interest, that would be exceptional. Is there anything in between? They reference it in their letter of interest, would
Yeah.
maybe be a 3 or something.
Yeah.
Brad, how does that set with you?
I do like it being separate. I think it's just gonna make it easier on all of us. Yeah.
Do you want like a policy and development?
I would say 0 if there's no DEI policy mentioned.
Yeah. Or if they should somehow say this is how we address this. And it could be we are all inclusive. They're still saying they are, but then later you ask, how do you do that?
And Teresa feels that the policy statement included would be 5 points. I could support that.
In the letter of interest, yeah. I
Right.
think it's going above and beyond.
And then I think I heard somebody say we're working on it. We're currently working on it. That could be one of those, the middle.
Yeah, that could be satisfactory for
By
sure.
the time they propose, they would have to present it. Or present something, even if it's a draft. Michaela, just to check in, we're almost out of time. What else do we need to do to move us along?
This is the last piece for the scoring, and then I was going to show you the updated timeline.
Okay.
So Michaela, number 3 could say draft DEI in process, policy in process.
Okay.
And then spell out DEI over on the left there.
Right. I have to go to another meeting in a second, but the 1 point could be, we've started the conversation. Like 0 would be they haven't even bothered with it. And 1 could say we've started the conversation, but we haven't. It's not in process yet.
Yeah, that's good, actually.
Okay.
Started or recognized it's an issue. Cool.
Okay, I'll wordsmith this. Okay.
We trust you.
All right. Are we good here?
Thanks, Mandy.
Okay. Let me pop over to the packet because it has the timeline, which you've all seen. So the only changes to the timeline is that we've extended the amount of time for applicants to send in their LOI, and then those that we invite to apply for the full application. We extended that time just to allow organizations a chance to, if they have to get approval in order to submit an LOI or application, to allow for that time. So highlighted are the CAC meeting dates. The bold are kind of more pertinent to the applicant. So we're hoping to send out the LOI on Monday, which is coming up soon. Having those LOIs come back August 5th, and then have you score them by the 16th, and then review in August for the CAC meeting. Invite those applicants that you want to fill out the full application by August 23rd. Due date for that application is October 18th. You'll score them, and then final decisions will be made November 18th.
I just want to ask the 12 p.m. I think I already shared this, but I'm not sure if it's online, but the 12 p.m. deadlines drive me nuts. Is there a really good reason for that? The noon, that's noon, right? Yeah.
That's good feedback. And I'm sure some of the other staff have other reasons. Sometimes I like to put 12 p.m. deadlines just so I have enough time to get those applications and send them out to like the CAC or whoever's reviewing those. Other staff, yeah.
Brad, are you uncomfortable with the time deadline altogether, or is it just the 12 p.m. versus 2 p.m. or versus some other time?
Yes, the 12 p.m. versus either just the date or a 5 p.m. I prefer just the date. Basically, it has to be in by on that day. If it's not received by October 18th, it's rejected. And then you look at them in the morning. Because I'm not sure why you'd need to send them out the same day, Michaela. Is that?
Yeah, let me, if we can change that to midnight, we can. Let me look at the timing on some of them, and I'll try to change.
Is there going to be anybody? Well, I guess if it was after hours, you would know if you received it electronically by midnight because you'd have a timestamp on the email. And if it was after midnight, you could say, sorry.
Yeah, and Rebecca turns off the process. I think she turns it off manually. Rebecca, do you want to weigh in on that, on this?
Sure, I'm happy to. There's a lot of different ways we can do it. I typically have a hard deadline set up, just because we want that fairness of people who are able to get it in the timeline that we suggested or asked for. Yeah, and I can have that set up at midnight or 12 p.m. or 3 p.m. or 2:52, whatever you all want to do.
I'm okay with whatever time. I just think I agree that there needs to be a deadline that's hard certain.
And the date is a deadline. It's as much of a deadline as 12 p.m. And this is personal experience. It's like, it just causes undue stress. It shouldn't, because it's, deadline is a deadline is a deadline, but 12 p.m. for whatever reason often causes more stress than is, unless there's a really good reason to do 12 p.m. It's better not to for nonprofits.
I think, Brad, I agree with you to the extent that as long as, when we say by a certain day, to me, if you say October 18th, in my head, I'm going to say October 18th at 12 at midnight when it's rolling to 10:19, right? And some organizations don't, end of day is when it would stop. So that's why I think it's important to define what the time is. I'm totally fine, of course, with moving it from noon, but I do think it needs to have a time just so the applicants are really clear.
Okay. So October 18th.
And Brad, if it helps, when I was in the Peace Corps, my organization lost a $19 million USAID grant because they were 4 minutes late.
Exactly.
It's painful, but I think it's important.
It's less likely you'll be 4 minutes late at midnight than at 12 noon.
Right.
Which is kind of my.
You think? I don't know. If it says 12 p.m. noon, I'm going to have it in at 7 a.m. Okay.
That's you, Donna. That's you. Anyways, I get back to the same point. Unless if there's a really good reason for 12 noon, then I'm open. But if there's not, please don't do that.
Good feedback. Thanks, Brad. All right, that's it for me. We are over time.
All right, yes, we are. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we accomplished our main goal.
Before we go, do we already agree upon Connor joining the CAC?
Good question.
Thank you.
Because wasn't they supposed to be accepted today or say hello or whatever?
Yes, so there's a survey out, it ends today. If you haven't voted yet, please do, and I can send that again, or you can chat me or whatever if you're missing the link. So please complete that by today.
Okay.
Michaela, by noon or by the end of day?
No, I don't, I hope I didn't set a time.
Thanks, guys. I'll see you later.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Leslie.
Bye.
Good meeting, everybody.
Okay, it looks like it's all staff except for Elizabeth. So am I too chatty?
No, not at all.
Are you sure? Because I feel like I'm the only one talking. But I'm very boisterous and I have very strong opinions about things. So am I helpful to you guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We appreciate it.
I'm literally writing on my notes. Why am I the only one talking?
That's okay, Teresa. I do that all the time too.
Okay, just looking for a little, making sure. Okay, thank you. See you guys. Bye.
Bye. Hi, Elizabeth.
She can't talk back to you through her computer. She can only talk on the phone, and she hung up the phone. So I think she intends to hang up the computer. Gwen, if you want to help her out.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you can stop the recording too. Thank you.